Imagine walking into a courtroom, nervous but determined, believing the law will protect you. Now picture the very person who is supposed to uphold justice, the judge, secretly plotting against you. That's exactly what happened to a woman everyone thought was ordinary, quiet, and powerless. She was underestimated by everyone in the room, especially the judge who believed he could twist the law and frame her without anyone noticing. What no one knew was that this woman carried a secret. She wasn't just a simple face in the crowd. She was a hidden legal genius.
The case began like any other dispute, filled with documents, arguments, and heavy words meant to confuse. The judge, using his authority, tried to corner her with unfair rulings, hoping she would break under pressure. To the public, it looked like the end of her fight before it had even started. But beneath her calm silence, she was watching closely every detail, every slip, every manipulation. She knew the law better than anyone suspected, and she was waiting for the right moment to reveal it. This was not just about defending herself. It was about exposing a system where power is often misused and showing that even the highest seat in the room could be challenged by truth. The tension grew as whispers filled the courtroom, people wondering if the judge's words would crush her spirit. But with each passing moment, she grew stronger, piecing together the evidence, ready to turn the tables. What happened next left the entire courtroom stunned. The judge, who thought he was in control, soon realized he had underestimated the very woman he tried to destroy. But how did she reveal her brilliance? And what secrets of the law did she use to fight back? That's where the story truly begins. The woman's name was Clara, and in her small town, she was known as a modest, hardworking figure. Most saw her as someone who blended into the background, living a simple life without power or influence. But what no one realized was that Clara had spent years studying the law quietly, not in big universities or fancy offices, but in late nights with stacks of borrowed books and endless hours of research. She understood every hidden corner of legal language, the kind of knowledge that only comes from passion and persistence. Yet, she never showed it until the day fate pulled her into that courtroom. The judge overseeing her case was feared by many. He had a reputation for sharp rulings and a voice that silenced even the boldest lawyers. To him, Clara was easy prey, an untrained woman with no official degree, no title, and no one to defend her. He believed he could twist the case to his advantage, and no one would dare to question him. After all, who would take the word of a simple woman over the word of a judge? That arrogance was the very weakness Clara saw. From the start, the case seemed stacked against her. Documents were misplaced, objections overruled, and subtle remarks hinted that the outcome was already decided. People sitting in the gallery exchanged uneasy glances, sensing something unfair but powerless to speak. Clara, however, remained calm. Each time the judge tried to corner her, she listened carefully, noting contradictions in his words, storing away every clue like pieces of a puzzle. What no one could see was that Clara was preparing her moment. Beneath her quiet demeanor, a storm was forming. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was about to challenge the very foundation of the courtroom. And soon, everyone would witness it. As the hearings dragged on, Clara began to see the layers of the trap laid out before her. The judge wasn't acting alone. Certain lawyers on the opposing side seemed unusually confident, as if they already knew the verdict would lean their way. Papers arrived late, some altered with details that didn't match the originals, and witnesses who should have supported Clara suddenly changed their statements. It was clear that this was more than a case. It was a performance staged to discredit her and protect someone else's interests. Clara, however, didn't let fear show. Each setback became a clue, and each unfair decision revealed the judge's overconfidence. She started keeping a hidden notebook, carefully recording the exact words spoken, the timing of rulings, even the tone of questions asked. What looked like quiet submission was actually her building a map of the corruption running through the trial. She knew that when the moment came, those details would matter more than anything. Outside the courtroom, whispers about Clara began to spread. Some neighbors saw her as brave for standing alone against authority, while others worried she was making a mistake that could cost her everything. Reporters lingered in the halls, sensing there was more to this story than an ordinary dispute. One young journalist in particular began to follow Clara's case closely, convinced that if she uncovered the truth, it would expose a scandal much bigger than anyone expected. The judge, meanwhile, tightened his grip. He used sharp words to belittle Clara, mocking her lack of formal training and dismissing her points before she could finish. His strategy was clear: wear her down, break her spirit, and end the trial quickly. But Clara's eyes never wavered. She wasn't just defending herself anymore, she was preparing to reveal something that could shake the entire courtroom. And with each passing day, that moment drew closer. Each new day in the courtroom felt heavier than the last. The judge grew bolder, his tone sharper, almost certain that Clara would eventually crumble. He leaned on his authority, slamming down objections, cutting her off mid-sentence, and declaring her arguments irrelevant. To the spectators, it looked like she was being buried under the weight of the system itself. But behind her calm face, Clara was drawing closer to the breaking point, the moment she had been quietly preparing for all along. The evidence against her seemed overwhelming, yet Clara noticed something the others ignored. The inconsistencies were too precise, almost rehearsed. Witnesses repeated the same phrases, documents carried matching errors, and rulings were timed to silence her strongest points. It was no accident. This was a carefully orchestrated scheme, and the judge was at the center of it. Clara knew that if she exposed even one thread of this web, the whole structure could unravel. The young journalist who had been following her case began to suspect it too. Late at night, she pieced together notes and old records, noticing strange patterns in the judge's past rulings. Stories of other, simple people losing mysteriously similar cases began to surface. For the first time, it wasn't just Clara fighting alone. An undercurrent of doubt was spreading beyond the courtroom walls. Still, the judge pressed harder, determined to end it before the cracks widened. His voice boomed across the chamber, trying to silence her final line of defense. But Clara refused to be shaken. She raised her eyes, calm but unyielding, and began to speak in a tone no one had heard from her before. Every word carried weight. Every sentence cut through the silence. The entire room leaned in, sensing that something extraordinary was about to happen. The climax was near, and no one could predict what would unfold next. The room hung in silence as Clara's voice cut through the tension. But just as the atmosphere shifted in her favor, a shocking twist unfolded. A new file appeared in the courtroom, one that had not been mentioned before. The opposing lawyers claimed it was a last-minute discovery, a piece of evidence that would end the case immediately. The judge allowed it without hesitation, his smirk returning as the heavy folder landed on the table. Gasps rippled through the audience. How could such crucial evidence suddenly appear after weeks of testimony? Clara carefully opened the file, her hands steady though her heart pounded. Inside were documents stamped with official seals, supposedly proving her guilt beyond question. To anyone else, it looked devastating, the final blow. But Clara's eyes narrowed. She recognized the format of the documents instantly. The wording, the dates, even the placement of the seals, something was wrong. They were clever forgeries, designed to look official, but to someone who understood the fine print of legal procedure, the flaws were undeniable. The spectators whispered nervously, convinced Clara was finished. The young journalist scribbled furiously in her notebook, sensing that this was no ordinary twist, but perhaps the most dangerous move yet. If Clara couldn't disprove these papers, the entire fight would collapse around her. The judge leaned back in his chair, certain victory was within reach, his confidence louder than words. But what no one expected was Clara's response. Instead of panicking, she closed the folder gently and lifted her gaze toward the bench. Her silence stretched long enough for the room to grow restless, as though she were weighing not just her defense, but the entire future of the trial. And then, with a calm that unsettled even her enemies, she began to question the very foundation of the new evidence, hinting that what had just been introduced could turn the case in an entirely new direction. The stakes had risen higher than ever, and the courtroom braced itself for an explosive revelation still to come. Clara stood tall, the weight of every eye in the courtroom pressing down on her. She slowly turned the forged documents back toward the judge, her voice steady but sharp as she began pointing out the errors that no ordinary person would notice. The date on the seal, she revealed, belonged to an office that didn't even exist at the time. The signature stamped at the bottom was copied from another unrelated case. The formatting? It followed a template that had been outdated for years. Each detail she uncovered wasn't just a flaw, It was proof that the evidence had been fabricated. Gasps filled the air. The opposing lawyers shifted uncomfortably, their faces drained of confidence. For the first time, the judge's expression faltered. His booming authority shrank into silence as Clara laid bare the truth piece by piece. She wasn't just defending herself anymore. She was exposing the entire scheme before a room full of witnesses. The young journalist quickly realized the enormity of what was unfolding. She captured every word, knowing this would become a story that could shake the foundations of the legal system. People in the gallery leaned forward, stunned by the courage and brilliance of the woman they once thought was powerless. Clara, the so-called simple woman, had turned the trap into her greatest weapon. Then came the final twist. Just as Clara declared the evidence fraudulent, another voice rose from the gallery. An older lawyer, long retired, stepped forward. He revealed that he too had faced the same judge years ago and had been silenced by the same tactics. Clara's victory had given him the courage to speak out at last. Suddenly, this was no longer just her battle. It was the unmasking of a pattern that had been hidden for years. The courtroom erupted in chaos, and while Clara's fight had reached its peak, it was clear this was only the beginning of a much larger storm. The uproar in the courtroom grew until the judge could no longer control it. His attempts to silence the crowd only drew more suspicion, and whispers quickly spread into shouts. The retired lawyer's testimony gave Clara's revelations undeniable weight, and soon the journalist's notes were being relayed to editors waiting outside. What had started as one woman's lonely battle had become a breaking story that no one could ignore. Under pressure, the opposing lawyers withdrew their claims, unable to defend the forged evidence any longer. The judge, once untouchable, now faced his own scrutiny. For the first time, he found himself on the defensive as eyes that once obeyed him now questioned his every move. Clara, calm but resolute, had shifted the balance of power simply by refusing to be silenced. When the final gavel fell, the case against her collapsed. She walked out of the courtroom not only free of blame, but admired for her courage and intelligence. Reporters crowded the steps, calling her a legal genius in disguise, while townspeople who once doubted her now saw her as a symbol of hope. The retired lawyer thanked her quietly, saying she had done what he could not years before. Clara didn't claim victory with grand speeches. She simply reminded everyone that justice belongs to those willing to stand for truth, no matter how small they may seem. Her quiet strength proved that even the most powerful can be challenged when honesty is matched with knowledge. The story spread far beyond her town, inspiring others who had once felt powerless in the face of authority. And though the judge's downfall had only just begun, Clara's chapter had closed with a reminder that fairness in the law depends not on titles, but on those brave enough to demand it.